So it recently came out that the Denver Nuggets are heavily interested into three names that are going to be on the trade market this year. Zach LaVine of the Chicago Bulls, Jimmy Butler of the Miami Heat, and Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans. And for this Nuggets team right now, they're trying to maximize their championship window with Nikola Jokic playing arguably one of the best seasons we have seen in the 21st century, at least on the offensive end of the floor. And for the Nuggets this year, they're currently ranked 16th in defense, 5th in offense, and 13th in the NBA in terms of net rating. And they're trying to add another big name to kind of shake up this offense this year. Since they did re-sign Aaron Gordon late in the offseason, they also re-signed Jamal Murray late in the offseason as well. Those players cannot be traded this NBA season. So the one person that could get moved in a deal that would bring Ingram, LaVine, or Butler to Denver would be Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. is set to make $35 million this year, $38 million next year, $40 million in 2027, which means he would be an unrestricted free agent in 2028. That $40 million in 2027 would make up around 24% of a team's total cap space right now. Michael Porter Jr. is 26 years old. He's currently averaging 18.5 points this year. He's shooting 51% from the field, 38% from three, and around 67% from the free throw line. He's added on around 7 rebounds a night, as well as 3 assists per game. And for Michael Porter Jr., that is very impressive for him to his standards, averaging 3 assists a night. So why would the Nuggets want to make a move right now to shake up their core that won a title 2 years ago? Well, I think they handicapped themselves in re-signing Jamal Murray. They didn't have to do so. Jamal Murray was going to be a free agent at the end of this year's season, but last year he had a disappointing regular season and an even more disappointing playoff run after we saw him go off in the 2023 playoffs. And then you add on a very disappointing Olympic showing from Jamal Murray for Team Canada. All signs were pointing to Jamal Murray not having a great year to his standards. Well, that didn't stop Calvin Booth from extending Jamal Murray to pay him $46 million next year, a $10 million pay raise. He'll be making $50 million in 2027, $53 million in 2028, and then $57 million in 2029, which is going to take up around 28% of the team's total cap space. He will have a cap hold in the 2030 free agency of $79 million. For someone that is 27 years old, he's going to be 28 at the end of the year. This was a crazy move to make because Jamal Murray has never made an all-star game in his career. And with all the factors that pointed to at least a little bit of regression for Murray this year, this was way too premature for Calvin Booth and the Denver Nuggets to give this extension to Jamal Murray. They also extended Aaron Gordon since he was going to be a free agent at the end of the 2026 season. Well, that opted in that player option that he could have opted out of. He's going to be making $22 million next year, $31.9 million in 2027, $34 million in 2028, and then has a $37 million player option in 2029. So if you want to add more of somebody that can control the offense with the ball in their hands and you can make something work adjacent to Jokic, and Jokic doesn't need to make you involved in this offense. Those are three guys that do work well in the isolation in Butler, Ingram, and Zach LaVine. Let's talk about Zach LaVine first. It came out the other night that the Nuggets had significant interest in Zach LaVine. And the Chicago Bulls tried to trade Zach LaVine all offseason, but nobody wanted him. He's making $43 million this year, $45.5 million next year, and then has a $48 million player option in 2027 when he's going to be around 32 years old. LaVine this year has been healthy so far after only playing 25 games last year. He's averaging 21.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per night. He's shooting 50% from the field, 42% from three, and 80% from the line. And I do not mind Zach LaVine in theory in this Denver Nuggets offense because he can create his own shots with the ball in his hands. He's a better playmaker. He's a better passer than Michael Porter Jr. He's more shifty in the half court. And I think the two-man game between Zach LaVine and Nikola Jokic could actually be fairly effective. Now, Michael Porter Jr. is a few years younger than Zach LaVine. He's a much more consistent three-point shooter based on the sample sizes of their careers. But I honestly think Zach LaVine could make this offense a little bit more efficient. And you're definitely not getting the secondary shot creation and the playmaking ability, the first step that we've seen from Jamal Murray in the past this year. I'm really convinced that we're not going to see the 2023 version of Jamal Murray this year in the playoffs. And I think Zach LaVine can complement that. And losing Michael Porter Jr. does lose you some size. Zach LaVine is 6'5" compared to Michael Porter Jr. being 6'10", but you have enough size in Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic in the front court. So I think you could sacrifice some of the size right there. You go down to Zach LaVine. Christian Brown is a good perimeter defender. I think Julian Strother and most notably Peyton Watson have taken steps on that end of the floor this year. So I actually would approve of going from Michael Porter Jr. to Zach LaVine, because Zach LaVine is still just 29 years old. He's under contract for the next 3 years. Is it a good contract? No, but at least he's under contract compared to trading for Jimmy Butler, who is a free agent at the end of this year. Because Shams reported a couple weeks ago that Jimmy Butler would be open to a trade this year, and he'd be open to a trade to the Dallas Mavericks, the Houston Rockets, or the Golden State Warriors. And then it came out that the Phoenix Suns could be interested. And out of all those teams, I could only see Golden State making a trade for Jimmy Butler, as they're trying to maximize the Steph Curry window before he retires. Jimmy Butler is 35 years old. He is a player option at $52 million for next year, and all signs are pointing to Jimmy Butler opting out of that and looking for one last major deal in free agency. Through 19 games this year, Jimmy is averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. He's shooting 55% from the field and 35% from three, and I do think he can operate well in this Denver Nuggets offense for this season. I'm just a little afraid that if you pay Jimmy Butler $50 million a year for the next 3 years, so it's going to be $150 million total till he's 38 years old, I would pull the alarm on that. I would not be a fan of that contract. I don't think he would age particularly well over the next 3 years, because Jimmy has had injury concerns over the last few years. He has yet to play 70 games in a season since 2017. 60 games last year, was hurt for round 1 against Boston, 64 games in 23, 57 games in 2022, and then 52 games in 2021. And I do think Jimmy can operate in this offense with the ball in his hands, and I do think it would be an efficient offense because Jimmy is still a great cutter, slasher. He could finish at the rim. He could still get to the free throw line. I have no gripes about Jimmy Butler in this offense this year, but you were trading away Michael Porter Jr. out of Aaron Gordon, Jokic, Murray, and MPJ. He's the youngest out of that 4. And if you're going to trade him away, a guy that's under contract for the next few years, for Jimmy Butler, who hasn't really shown that maybe he wants to play for the Denver Nuggets at this current moment, he could just leave for nothing in free agency. And maybe Denver would have the same mindset that Miami does, because Pat Riley isn't too stressed about trading Jimmy Butler, because he thinks they can orchestrate a sign and trade in the offseason, because there's only a few teams that have cap space, and there's smaller market teams that are currently not contending right now. So he thinks if Jimmy Butler wants to go to one of the teams he wanted to get traded to, like Houston or Golden State or Dallas, he would have to get something back in return in a sign and trade. So maybe Denver would have that thought process. I just think it's a little bit more risky trading Michael Porter Jr. for Jimmy Butler, because Jimmy Butler is pretty much 9 years older. Does he help you out in the playoffs this year? Yeah, I could see that. I think just getting more productive isolation play and somebody that can help you out in the half court more than Jamal Murray can, because I think you need either Michael Porter Jr. or the guy you trade for Michael Porter Jr. to be the number 2 for you in the playoffs. I'm not convinced that will be Jamal Murray. It's not going to be Aaron Gordon. It's not going to be Christian Brown. We know their skill sets. So yes, Jimmy does help you right now. It's just a huge risk if you don't win it all this year. And the last name that the Nuggets have shown heavy interest in is Brandon Ingram, who has played 18 games this year for the New Orleans Pelicans, averaging 22 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 5 assists a night. He shot 46% from the field, 37% from 3, and 85% from the line. He did suffer an ankle injury that was a contact injury that he's going to be out indefinitely. So Brandon Ingram may miss a decent amount of time, at least until the All-Star break. So you'd be trading Michael Porter Jr. for somebody that is currently hurt, and that is also an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. Ingram is making $36 million this season, but he can leave and sign with any team in the offseason. But you can give Ingram a max contract, and he could be inclined to re-sign with you in Denver. And my same thing before about Jimmy Butler. Not a lot of teams have cap space, but I could also see Brandon Ingram, who is still a young player in this league. He's 27 years old. He may not care to sign it with a contender. He may just want to take the most money out there. And what if he has that connection with Tranjan Langdon, his former GM in New Orleans, that is now the GM in Detroit, gives him a max contract? You're at the risk of losing Brandon Ingram for nothing, and you basically gave up Michael Porter Jr. for half a year Brandon Ingram, and I don't even think that maximizes your window that much more. I do agree that you need somebody that can score with the ball in their hands, and I think Ingram, Butler, and LaVine, all in a vacuum, do that better than Jamal Murray, at least this version of Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. But I think LaVine makes the most sense. All 3 of these guys have had injury concerns. Brandon Ingram has had notable injury concerns. He's going to miss time this year, 64 games last year, 45 games in 2023, and 55 games in 2022. He has not shown that he could stay healthy throughout the regular season at least. And Zach LaVine did play 77 games in that 2023 season, and he was unreal. He wasn't an all-star, but he averaged 25 points, shot 48% from the field on 36 minutes a night throughout 77 games. Obviously, last year he only appeared in 25 games. Season was cut short due to injuries. This year, though, he looks healthy. He does still look explosive out there, and I think he would make the most sense for the Denver Nuggets just because he's under contract. He could score at all three levels with the ball in his hands, and he can also score without the ball in his hands. He can cut, he can slash, he can move off screens, and I think if Denver does want to shake things up, I would be okay with a Michael Porter Jr. for Zach LaVine swap. If you can maybe even get off the Zeke Naji contract as well, and then maybe you could take another veteran back from Chicago if they're willing to do that at the deadline. So I do expect Denver to be kind of active this year at the deadline. I expect them to make a notable trade because this team this year has not shown that they're better than Dallas or OKC, and those are the teams they're gonna have to get through to win an NBA title. And if they want to win another one and not waste one of the greatest offensive seasons we've ever seen from Nikola Jokic, it's looking like that they are gonna make a major trade.